What happens when the guy who signs your paycheck shows up wearing a beard, snow goggles, and pretends he doesn't know how to strap on skis? That question ran through Trent Daniels' mind as the chairlift creaked behind him and the morning wind rolled off the mountain. He'd owned the ski resort chain for 8 years now, 16 locations across the country, but hadn't set foot in this one since the day he bought it. It was one of the older resorts, tucked in the Rockies, and lately, guest reviews had dipped hard. He'd read the reports. Slower lift times. Mechanical delays, a few minor injuries, nothing major yet but enough to make his gut twist. The district manager had brushed it off, said it was normal winter chaos. But Trent wasn't buying it, so he did what he hadn't done in years. He went undercover. He grew out a full beard, dyed it gray. Wore a beanie pulled low and some cheap tinted goggles. He signed up through a fake staffing agency his assistant set up, applied as a seasonal lift operator, and was placed at the resort under the name Doug. And no one recognized him. Most of the staff was new young seasonal hires, and the manager, someone named Kyle, had only been here for a year and a half. They'd never met in person. Trent arrived just after 6 in the morning. The staff lounge smelled like burnt coffee and wet gloves. He spotted a girl in her 20s wiping off her name tag. Alyssa, it read. Hey, she said, offering a tired but polite smile. First day. Yeah, Doug, Trent replied, offering a firm handshake. You're with me, chairlift 3, you ever run one before? Not really, he said, shrugging. I'm a fast learner. She smiled again, this time more genuine. You'll be fine. Just don't let Kyle catch you slacking. He's not great before noon. They hiked out to the lift station in silence. It was still dark, the mountain lights casting long shadows over the snow. Alyssa showed him how to check the lift cables, test the emergency stop, inspect the seat belts. She moved fast but careful, thorough. I do this every morning, she said, tightening a bolt on the seat bar. Even if Kyle says to skip it. Why would he say that? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. He says it's a waste of time, that the machines are fine, but I've seen people get hurt before. I don't mess with that. Trent nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He made a note in his head. By 8, the lift was humming. Skiers lined up. Trent watched Alyssa work the controls while he helped people onto the seats. She was calm, alert, always watching. Around 10, Kyle finally showed up, tall guy, maybe mid-30s, expensive ski jacket, phone glued to his hand. He barely glanced at Trent. Who's the new guy? Doug, Alyssa replied. Started today, Kyle grunted. Whatever, Doug, you can take a break, go grab coffee or something. I'm good, Trent said, Kyle's eyes narrowed. I said take a break. Alyssa spoke up. We haven't finished the safety checklist yet, Kyle scoffed. It's a damn chairlift, not a rocket ship. You don't need to babysit every bolt. Trent turned slowly. You don't check them, Kyle laughed. You serious? We'd never open on time if we did that every day. Trent's stomach dropped. Later that afternoon, Trent was reassigned to chairlift 5. Kyle had made the call. Doug's too slow, he'd told Alyssa. Chairlift 5 was older, loud, creaky, and sitting on the windy side of the slope. The operator there was a guy named Ben, maybe late 20s, with a cigarette tucked behind his ear and earbuds in. Checklist, Trent asked. Ben rolled his eyes. Kyle says it's fine, just don't hit the red button unless someone's dangling. Trent watched for an hour. People slipped. One kid dropped a ski. An old man nearly lost his pole. No one stopped the lift. Ben just scrolled on his phone or bobbed his head to music. At one point, Trent stepped in to help a mom with 2 kids get seated. Ben didn't move after his shift. Trent sat in the employee lounge, silent. Alyssa walked in, dropping into the seat beside him. You okay? I saw a lot today, he said quietly. She nodded. You'll get used to it, he looked at her. That's the problem. That night, back in his rental cabin, Trent stared at his reflection in the mirror, the beard, the beanie. The goggles. He'd built this company from the ground up, bought this resort when it was failing, hired people he trusted, but somehow, somewhere, he'd lost track of what was happening at the base of the mountain. Trent ran a hand down his face. He had to stay longer, watch more lifts, talk to more staff, and when he was ready, when he'd seen enough, he'd blow the whole thing wide open. By the 3rd morning, Trent had already started to feel the fatigue in his legs. The cold bit deeper when you weren't gliding down the mountain in custom gear. This wasn't a vacation, it was a grind. And that was exactly what he'd come here for. His assignment had changed again. Kyle had shuffled the schedule late the night before, this time dropping Trent at the base gondola, one of the busiest points on the mountain. The morning crowd swelled fast, and the line of skiers stretched well past the fenced queue by the time he arrived. "Doug Wright," said a man in his 40s, short beard, wind-chapped cheeks. His name tag read Ray. Trent nodded. "Stay sharp. This one gets ugly fast if we're not moving people every few seconds." Ray didn't waste time. He handed Trent a radio, showed him how to keep the doors clear, and pointed out hand signals for emergencies. Where Alyssa had been methodical, Ray operated like a battlefield medic, fast, efficient, and unfazed by chaos. Just before the gondola opened, Kyle appeared again, flanked by a woman in guest services who looked 2 steps behind trying to keep up with him. He didn't acknowledge Trent or Ray, but shouted to someone off to the side. "Let's move. People are already whining online." Ray leaned in. "He checks the resort's social feed before he checks the weather report." Trent said nothing, but filed it away. The morning rush was relentless. 2 hours in, Ray stepped aside briefly to answer a call on the radio. A teenage boy tripped while stepping into the gondola cabin, his snowboard catching under the edge. Trent instinctively reached out, grabbing the kid's jacket before he hit the floor. He helped him up, nodded, and reset the doors. Ray saw it from the corner of his eye. When the rush slowed, he walked over. "Good instincts. You've worked lifts before." "Something like that," Trent said. Ray didn't push. Later, the wind picked up. The temperature dropped sharply, and visibility began to waver. Ray called it out to dispatch over the radio. "Wind shear's getting worse. Can't see the ridge from the platform." Minutes later, Kyle's voice crackled over the line. "Keep it moving. I don't want delays. We're not shutting down unless it's a whiteout." Ray clenched his jaw but gave no reply. Trent stepped closer. "Is that normal?" Ray didn't answer at first. Then, without looking at him, he muttered, "Last year, a cabin stalled midline. People were stuck for almost half an hour in sub-zero wind chill. Kyle said the system was within tolerance." Trent stared at him. "And that was okay." "No," Ray said quietly. "But if you argue you're labeled a liability, I've got 2 kids. Health insurance is tied to this job." Trent's chest tightened. He looked around, saw the frost building on the gondola cables, the nervous glances from guests stepping into the cabins. By noon, the line had thinned. Ray was called away to assist with a guest complaint, leaving Trent alone on the platform. A woman in a green jacket approached slowly, limping slightly. "You okay?" Trent asked. "I took a bad fall up top. Patrol cleared me, but I'm trying to get back to the lodge." She looked pale. Trent helped her into the cabin gently, then tapped the emergency intercom once the doors closed. "This is Doug at Gondola Base. Cabin 23, possible injury, guests conscious but shaken." A pause. Then Kyle's voice. "Unless she's bleeding or unconscious, keep it moving." Trent's grip tightened on the intercom. "She's visibly hurt. She's riding." End of discussion. The cabin lifted off. Trent stepped back from the panel, heart pounding. When Ray returned, Trent relayed what had happened. Ray didn't look surprised. "You'll see worse before the week's over." That night, Trent stayed late, offering to help close down the lift with Ray. As they locked the platform gates, Ray mentioned something that made Trent freeze. "Tomorrow, you're at the summit runs. That's Tommy's territory." Tommy, Supervisor, been here longer than Kyle, knows the mountain better than anyone, but he and Kyle don't get along. Tommy's old school, safety first type. Kyle hates him for it. Trent nodded slowly. "He still works here, for now." The next morning, Trent took the snowcat up to the summit. The wind had carved sharp edges into the snow overnight, and the sun hadn't softened them yet. It was quieter up here, less guests, more terrain specialists. Tommy was already waiting when Trent arrived. Late 50s, lean, sun-darkened face. His jacket was patched at the elbows, and his gloves had seen years of wear. "You Doug." "That's me." "We're short on hands today." One guy called out, "You'll shadow me." Tommy didn't talk much at first. He showed Trent the summit lift, walked him through the gear room, pointed out avalanche sensors along the ridge. Everything had a reason. Everything was double-checked. By mid-morning, they were staffing the top lift together. A snowboarder came in too fast, clipping the seat as it swung. The chair jolted, then reset. Tommy hit the stop, checked the gear, then restarted it slowly. Every time, he said, you stop the lift every time something like that happens. If I don't, the next person's knee goes sideways. That's simple. Trent nodded. A few minutes later, Kyle arrived by snowmobile. He didn't greet anyone. What's the holdup? Tommy didn't look at him. Had to misload. Reset the lift. Kyle scanned the line of waiting skiers. You're holding up the summit for one misload. There's a process. Kyle stepped forward. You don't make that call, I do. Tommy turned slowly. It's not a call, it's protocol. Kyle's neck flushed red. You want to have this conversation in my office? Tommy took a breath. If you're overriding safety procedures, we can have that conversation with the state inspector. Your call. Kyle's eyes flicked toward Trent, then back to Tommy. We'll talk later. He left without another word. Trent watched Tommy carefully. You worried about pushing back like that? Tommy shook his head. You either do the job right or you don't do it at all. Later that afternoon, Tommy took a call from dispatch. A child had gone missing near the tree line below one of the double black runs. Patrol was already searching. Tommy looked toward the ridge, then back at Trent. You good covering this lift solo for 20 minutes? I can handle it. Tommy nodded once and disappeared down the slope. Trent kept the lift running, watched every load and unload. He started noticing little things: how guests acted more nervous up here, how easily a strap could snag, how fast one mistake could escalate. When Tommy returned, he was dragging a pair of skis behind him. No child, just gear. They found him on the other side of the ridge, he said. Safe. Cold but safe. That evening, Trent stayed behind again. Tommy was working on a gear locker, sorting through a box of old parts. You care about this place, Trent said. Tommy didn't turn around. It's a good mountain. Bad leadership doesn't change that. Trent stepped closer. If you had the authority, what would you fix first? Tommy looked up. I'd start by firing Kyle. Trent raised an eyebrow. That blunt. There's a difference between fast and reckless. He doesn't know it, and people are going to get hurt if someone doesn't stop him. Trent didn't reply. But his mind was already made up. He had seen enough. Tomorrow he'd end the charade. No more Doug, no more hiding. It was time to take back control of his company. The next morning, Trent Daniels arrived in street clothes. The beard was gone, along with the beanie and goggles. No one recognized him at first. He stepped into the staff lounge at shift change. The room quieted. Alyssa looked up from tying her boots, her brow furrowing. Ray, mid-sip of coffee, froze with the cup halfway to his lips. Tommy stood by the lockers, arms crossed, watching. Kyle entered a few seconds later, cradling his phone in one hand, chewing something with his mouth open. He didn't look up. Trent spoke clearly, not raising his voice. Good morning. I'm Trent Daniels. I own this resort. Kyle's gums snapped in his mouth. The silence shifted, no longer stunned, but sharpened with tension. Ray set his cup down without a sound. Alyssa leaned back against the bench, lips parted, staring in disbelief. Tommy didn't blink. Kyle laughed once, uncertain. Wait, what? I've spent the last week working as a lift operator, Trent continued. Observing, listening, learning what this place has become. Kyle straightened, face flushing. If this is about the overtime issue, I can explain. It's not about one thing. It's about everything. Trent walked toward the center of the room. No one moved. Employees working through injuries, safety checks ignored, equipment neglected, guests put at risk. And you, he turned to Kyle, you're at the center of it. Kyle opened his mouth, but Trent cut him off. You've created a culture where people are afraid to speak up, where performance is measured by speed, not safety, where a supervisor like Tommy is treated like a problem instead of someone holding the line. Kyle's voice cracked slightly. You have to understand the pressure we're under. Corporate wants numbers. We're hitting targets. I am corporate, Trent said, his tone hardening. And I never asked for corners to be cut. I built this company on the idea that the mountain takes care of people who respect it. You've been doing the opposite. Kyle's gaze darted around the room, looking for support. He found none. You're done, Trent said. Clean out your office. Security will escort you off the property. Kyle stepped forward, his voice rising. You can't just walk in here and throw me out like I can, and I am. Tommy stepped aside, opening the door without a word. Kyle hesitated, then stormed out. The room exhaled all at once. Trent turned to the rest of them. I owe a few of you an apology. For waiting this long to see what was happening. Alyssa stood slowly. You saw it for yourself. I did, he said, "and I saw who's been holding this place together." He looked at her, then at Ray, then at Tommy. "I'm not here to hand out speeches, but I'm making changes." Effective immediately. He asked everyone to join him in the main conference room in 20 minutes. They filed out in silence, whispering only once they were out of earshot. Inside the conference room, Trent pulled out a notepad and laid it on the table. He didn't sit. "I'm not bringing in some outside consultant to fix this. You don't need someone to tell you how to do your jobs. You've been doing them in spite of everything. What you need is support, structure, and a voice in how this resort is run." Ray folded his arms. "You really mean to rebuild this from inside?" "Yes, starting with promoting Tommy to general manager of this location." Tommy raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't speak. Trent continued. "He knows this mountain better than anyone. More importantly, he doesn't compromise on safety." He turned to Alyssa. "You've been doing supervisory work without the title or the pay. That changes today. You're officially shift lead for lift operations." Her hands stayed in her lap, but her eyes locked on his. "You're serious?" "I am." "You've been documenting safety issues, following procedure in an environment where you were told not to. That's leadership." She nodded once slowly. "Ray," Trent said next, "you've been covering shifts outside your hours, training new hires. You're now lead for base operations. And you'll be part of monthly planning meetings." Ray gave a small nod, eyes narrowing as if waiting for the catch. "There's more," Trent said. "I've contacted headquarters. We're dispatching a compliance team to re-inspect every lift on this mountain. No more relying on Kyle's word or shortcut reports. Every piece of equipment will be logged, tested, and cleared before we start the next cycle." He paused. "Anyone who doesn't want to follow the new protocols is free to leave. No hard feelings, but we're not cutting corners." "Not anymore." Someone at the back of the room, one of the newer lift techs, raised a hand. "What about the staffing shortage? We're still down people. Even with new leads, we're stretched." "I'm aware," Trent said. "We're hiring, starting today. And I've doubled the housing stipend for seasonal staff. That'll help us attract better applicants and keep the ones we have." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. "Also," he added, "breaks will be enforced, not suggested. You can't do your job if you're running on fumes. We're rotating coverage at lifts to make sure no one's stuck alone in the cold for hours." Tommy leaned forward slightly. "That's going to require backup operators, cross-trained. And you'll get them," Trent said. "Anyone interested in cross-training will be paid during certifications. No more unpaid learning." For the first time, someone chuckled quietly. It wasn't mocking, it was relief. Trent looked around the room. "This place has history. I'm not here to erase it. I'm here to make sure it has a future. And that future starts with the people in this room." When the meeting ended, no one rushed out. They stood in small circles, talking quietly, some with cautious optimism, others still processing. Later that afternoon, Trent walked the lift lines again, this time in a jacket with his name on it. Not as a disguise, as a reminder. Guests waved. A few employees nodded. Others still avoided eye contact, unsure. At chairlift 3, he stopped beside Alyssa. "How's it going with the new role?" he asked. She shrugged. "Feels weird, still doing the same things. Just now it counts." He smiled. "It always counted. Now it's just recognized." She looked up the slope. "You think people will actually trust this place again?" "They will," Trent said. "Once they see we're serious." She didn't answer, but the way she reset the lift panel, deliberate, careful, said enough. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, Trent stood at the summit lift with Tommy. "You ever think about leaving?" Trent asked. "Twice," Tommy replied. "First time I stayed because the mountain still deserved better. Second time I stayed because I didn't trust who'd replace me." Trent looked out over the slope. "You don't have to worry about that anymore." Tommy nodded. "Good. Because this place deserves a hell of a lot better than what it's had." They stood in silence as the last few skiers filed down the trail. That night, before heading back to his cabin, Trent stopped by the maintenance shed. It smelled of grease and old wood. A young tech was working on a seat assembly, headlamp flickering slightly as he adjusted a worn bolt. "Need a hand?" Trent asked. The kid looked up, startled, then nodded. Trent rolled up his sleeves, sat down, and picked up a wrench. The temperature had dropped 5 degrees overnight, and the wind rolled in from the east, carrying a sharp edge. Trent Daniels stood by the lower gondola station, this time without a radio or lift assignment. He wasn't here to observe anymore. He was here to rebuild. He had spent the previous evening reviewing every personnel file, incident report, and maintenance log from the past 2 seasons. What he'd uncovered went deeper than bad management. It was a systemic breakdown of accountability. Kyle had filtered information, reworded injury reports, and dismissed staff concerns with official-sounding language that kept red flags buried. Trent had already forwarded the documentation to corporate HR. Kyle would never work at another resort under his umbrella again. But it wasn't just about removing a problem. It was about reinforcing a standard. Trent stepped inside the operations office just before the first lift opened. The air was tight with tension. Tommy stood over a map of the ridge trails, marking off sections flagged for wind exposure. Alyssa was reviewing the rotation board, her brow furrowed. Ray entered a minute later, carrying a clipboard with a fresh set of weather updates. His boots left a trail of slush across the floor. "I've got gusts peaking at about 45 on the upper ridge," he said, laying the clipboard on the table. "If they climb another 10, we'll have to shut down the summit runs." Tommy didn't look up from the map. "We'll stagger the lift lines and start slow." "If we stagger arrivals, it'll keep guests from bottlenecking." Trent nodded. "Do it. Safety first. If we lose a few bookings, we lose them." Alyssa pointed to the rotation board. "We still need a backup for Lift 5. Adam's out with the flu, and no one else has certification for that model." Trent had anticipated that. "I've arranged for a certified tech from our Montana site to fly in tonight. He'll be here by morning. Until then, we close Lift 5. Ray raised an eyebrow. "That's one of the busiest midlines." "Then we explain to guests why it's closed," Trent said, "and we do it face to face." The group nodded. No one argued. An hour later, Trent joined Alyssa on the mid-mountain transfer line. She was assigning positions for the day, rotating staff in 30-minute intervals to prevent fatigue, something that previously hadn't existed. The system wasn't perfect yet. They were still short-staffed, but the rhythm was starting to change. A young lift operator named Mateo approached, rubbing his shoulder. "I can take another round at the top. It's not that bad." Alyssa shook her head. "You've already done 2. Take your break. No exceptions." Trent pulled her aside as Mateo stepped away. "He's pushing. He's used to covering for others. Says he doesn't mind, but his left hand was shaking when he took his glove off." Trent watched Mateo walk toward the break tent, then turned back to her. "Keep enforcing it. Hard habits take time to undo." As the day wore on, cabin dispatch reported a holdup at the summit lift. Trent hiked up with Tommy to check it out. At the top, 2 guests were arguing with an operator about a delay. "We waited 30 minutes to get up here," one of them said, arms crossed. "Now you're telling us we can't go down." The operator, a high school senior named Noah, looked overwhelmed. "There's high wind on the ridge. Patrol says it's not safe yet." The second guest cut him off. "This is ridiculous. Every other resort runs in weather like this." "What are we paying for?" Tommy arrived beside Noah. "You're paying to get home in one piece. Ridge is closed until patrol clears it. You're welcome to take a lower run." The first guest opened his mouth again, but Trent stepped forward. "I'm the owner," he said calmly. "And I stand by the decision. I'd rather refund your lift pass than file an injury report." The guest stared at him, then turned and walked off without another word. Noah let out a breath. "Thanks, wasn't sure what to do." "You did exactly what you should," Trent said. Always back the safety call. Back at the base, a different issue was unfolding. The rental shop had a line out the door, and only 2 staff members were checking gear. Trent stepped inside and scanned the room. 2 guests were arguing over a delayed boot fitting, and a child was crying in the corner, 1 foot bare. A staffer named Lanny was juggling 3 tasks at once. She spotted Trent and waved him over. "We're out of youth sizes for boots," she said. "Shipments delayed." "I've got parents waiting for something that's not coming." "When did we place the order?" "Last week. Kyle signed off, but I don't think he actually submitted it. It never reached the supplier." Trent exhaled through his nose. "Document everything." "I'll expedite the order personally and overnight a box from another location." Lanny nodded, already moving toward the back room. As Trent turned to leave, he noticed a guest in the corner with a service dog, a young woman waiting patiently with a clipboard in her lap. None of the staff had approached her. Trent walked over. "You've been helped," she smiled politely. "Not yet. I filled out the adaptive equipment form online. I'm supposed to have a seated ski fitted today," he frowned. "Did anyone confirm your appointment?" "No." "I tried calling, but no one picked up." Trent tracked down the old adaptive program coordinator's notes. The program had technically been active, but Kyle had never reactivated the vendor contract after the last season. It had quietly lapsed. He returned to her. "I'm sorry. The system failed you. But I'll make it right." She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. Trent placed a call to an adaptive gear provider in Denver. It cost more to rush the equipment, but he didn't flinch. Then he called HR. "I want a full-time adaptive coordinator hired for this location. Not seasonal, not contract. Full employee benefits." By late afternoon, the wind had eased, and patrol cleared the summit ridge. The lifts resumed, but with a cap on cabin passengers to limit weight stress. Ray managed the line with two other operators, spacing out guests and guiding them with clear instructions. For the first time in days, the line moved without shouting. Inside the employee lounge, the atmosphere had shifted. People still looked tired, but there was a different kind of energy, one that came from knowing their work wasn't invisible anymore. Alyssa sat at a corner table, jotting down notes. "Everything all right?" Trent asked. She nodded. "Just writing up a suggestion list. Little things. Better signage for the beginner runs, more gloves in the lost and found. A few people mentioned it." "Good," he said. "Keep it coming." Tommy entered a minute later. Patrol found a cracked pole near the ridge, buried under the snow, could have been missed. Trent didn't hesitate. "Review the area. If it's unstable, we close the run again." Tommy nodded. "Already flagged it." "They're roping it off now." The sun was dipping low when Trent walked the base one last time. The crowd had thinned and the mountain cast long shadows over the snow. He stopped near the gondola platform where Noah was helping a family unload gear. "You heading out for the day?" Trent asked him. "Almost. Just wanted to make sure everyone got down safe." Trent looked at him for a moment. "You thinking of coming back next season?" Noah hesitated. "I wasn't, but maybe now." He watched the kid walk toward the break tent, then turned back to the slope. The mountain hadn't changed. The wind still cut sharp, the lift still creaked, and the snow still buried everything it touched, but the people had changed. And that made all the difference.